Hey everybody, and welcome to the video introduction for Hold'em Forge Analytics. I'm Ryan, I'm one of the designers who worked on this software, and what I'm going to be doing today is taking you through some basics of game theory, our software's features and functionality, and we'll definitely talk about how Hold'em Forge can make a difference in your poker game. So we don't have much time, let's just get into it. You know, if I lose you guys, don't sweat it, because you can just go online to the website, check out our documents section. We just uploaded a document that does a pretty good job of explaining these concepts I'm just going to barely touch on today. We're also going to be updating our video section pretty regularly, so you should be able to find some video resources explaining these within a pretty short order. So the bare minimum you need to know for now is there's three kinds of game theory models. A Nash strategy, which is good to play because it's kind of it's safe. It doesn't really require much information about the opponent, and it's minimally exploitable. A Bayes strategy, which sort of assumes that you have a read on an opponent. For example, I think he's bluffing, but it's risky because if it turns out that you're wrong, you know, I think he's bluffing, but he's actually betting with a strong hand, then you can actually wind up losing more than you would if you played a Nash strategy. And then a restricted response, which is kind of a mix between the two. And it keeps your total risk. So the long-term amount of money that you would lose if it turns out that you're exactly wrong and you know, the guy's playing a nightmare strategy against you, it keeps that amount you would lose below a threshold that you can actually pick. So yeah, I guess the best way that we can learn a little bit more about how the software works is to just go through a sample situation. So what I've done is I've gone on to pokerhandreplays.com and I've uploaded a hand history, and we're just going to analyze it using Hold'em Forge. So let's get into it. Let's see. All right, so we've got a 6-max game here, and I'm just going to pause it periodically to discuss the action. The guy in the cutoff raises to a standard bet of about $3. And the button calls. And let's see, yep, everybody folds. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pull up our software. Well, we'll go one more step. So then the guy in the cutoff continuation bets for 2/3 pot on the flop. And the question is, what would you do with not just Jack-10 suited, which is what the guy on the button has in this situation, but what would you do with every single hand in your range at this point? And this is definitely a situation which computers can help give you a pretty rough answer, which that you can then sort of use to help construct your strategy overall. So let's see what Hold'em Forge has to say about this. I've already put the flop in, using our handy dandy board card editing tool. I've also put the pot size in. I've multiplied it by 10 just because I don't like decimal points. Same with the bet size. I've sort of assumed that the opponent's going to bet 80% of the pot with some hands. We don't know what those hands are, but with some hands on the next round, which is just a modeling assumption. And so now what I have to do is input pre-flop ranges for both players. This is actually pretty easy using our interface we have designed here. What I'm going to do is just use my standard sort of cold calling range that I'll sometimes cold call with, and I've already got it in a save file. And likewise, I'm going to assume that this other guy is probably raising from the cutoff with maybe 30% of his hands or so in this situation. And this is a pretty decent range to be doing that with, or at least it's one that, it's fairly conceivable that someone could be raising with these hands. So let's just go with it. Let's see what Hold'em Forge has to say about calling a continuation bet in this situation. So I just press analyze, and we're just waiting on the results. As you can see, they pop out pretty fast. So on this output screen, we have actually a number of pretty useful resources. The first one I'd like to look at is this strategy breakdown by starting hands grid. It tells us what to do with every single hand in our range. As you can see, some hands are going to be calls and some are going to be folds. The red squares are going to be mostly calls, and the blue squares are going to be all folds, and then the sort of in-between purplish, reddish ones, they're going to be, a mixture of the underlying hands are going to be played either way. But this isn't the only sort of, way that you can tell how to play a hand. For example, if I happen to have, let's say second pair, I can actually go over to this second grid here and look at the color of this bar graph here, and it's all red. So what that means is that 100% of my second pair hands are actually going to be played as calls according to the Nash strategy, or according to the strategy that I've told it to compute, which in this case is a Nash strategy. There's a couple other numbers that you can get out of this. The first useful one is the prevalence number, which is just to the right of this. And as you can see, it's 17 in this case. So what that means is just given my pre-flop range, I flop second pair, or actually between second pair and less than top pair 17% of the time. And if I call, it turns out that 30% of my calling range will be a second pair or less than top pair hand. And you can apply that to the draws too. It looks like 49% of my backdoor flush draws are going to be calls, for example. There's also this little box down here which can be useful. It just tells me my weakest call, which is and my strongest fold, which are kind of useful indicators for what to do with key hands. So, for example, 6-6, it looks like is about going to be the weakest hand that I would call with in this case. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to try a different situation. I'm going to say, let's assume that I have the information that my opponent is only going to be betting with, let's say, ace, king, aces, and kings. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell my, I'm going to tell Hold'em Forge to respond to that read and say, well, what would I do if it turns out that I think he's only continuation betting whatever the percentage of time that he has aces, kings, or ace, king only is going to be. So that's going to be some very small number. But what should my calling behavior be in that case? And I'll just tell it to crunch. And it looks like I'm playing sets only at this point. So obviously, this shows one of the weaknesses of a base strategy, which is if you believe your opponent model 100% of the time, you can play strategies that are kind of ridiculous looking on the surface, right? I mean, if this guy's betting, 3% of the time, then it's correct to only call sets. But how often does that really happen? So one thing that might be appropriate in this case would be to check out what a more restricted response to this read would be. So I'm just going to say, all right, I'll risk 3 big blinds on the fact that I think he's only betting aces, kings, or ace, king, and tell it to crunch. And as you can see, if we wait for it to compute, I'll turn out to have a much more reasonable strategy. You're definitely calling a lot more than just sets in this case. And what's interesting is if you check out that strategy EV tab on the starting hands grid, what that does is it tells you the expectation of this strategy against the opponent model. And in this case, you'll notice that the restricted response strategy EV was exactly the same as it was for the base response. It's really rare when it happens, but when it does, it means you want to play the restricted response because the restricted response is a lot less risky. And if you're getting the same reward for a lot less risk, it makes a lot more sense to choose the less risky option and go with the restricted response. So we're almost out of time. So the last thing I want to cover is just, our vision for using our product. And so here it is. Hold'em Forge is not a model of a complete poker game. Instead, it's designed to answer a very simple question and get the results to you as quickly as possible in as many ways, graphically, intuitively, numerically as you can stomach, basically. So that you can ask a question, get the answer, and move on with your poker playing career. We don't want our model building process to be hours upon hours of building game trees or anything like that, and we certainly don't want to have to compute solutions in a computing cluster for 2 weeks in order to get you an answer. So we had to strike a balance. And the way we did it was we focused on a simple question. What do I do if I just want to check call down? And if you stick to asking that question, our software gives you extremely accurate results. Over 2 rounds, our models are basically spot on. I hesitate to say perfect, so I'll say almost perfect representations of that game, but the check call down game is what this software is designed to model. It's not designed to model check raising, complicated actions like that. But it will give you basic ideas of what ranges to continue and fold with. And you can use those ranges to construct your strategies in post-flop games. Some of the most useful places to apply this are playing 3-bet pots, play with weird bet sizes, tricky boards, complicated situations. So one thing we recommend that our users do is actually create a list of maybe 20, 30 flops that they think are pretty representative of, board cards that come out a lot in their games. For example, maybe an ace 8-4 board is kind of similar to like an ace 7-4 board. So you can plan out your strategies in a lot of different situations with different preflop ranges, different bet sizes, and see what you should be continuing with roughly. As you see more of these, you'll be building a really intuitive understanding of these post-flop poker situations. Anyway, so we're out of time, so just check out the website. Thanks for your interest, and good luck at the tables, everybody.